It's gotten bad. It's gotten real bad. I had such high hopes going in, such eagerness for how this rapidly evolving story would be continued. For the game to at least be good. Worse, it's life-changing, and it hasn't left my mind since. The new music, Tenna's 3D rendered presence, the water cooler fights, gay moments in aura, elevated party angst, an almost Homestuckian amount of character conflict, 2 endings to linger on the rammies of, or I guess 3. Oh, and the release window for Chapter 5 shown after the credits. That's a new one. Yes, I did scream. Multiple times, across both new chapters for reasons I'm still trying to decipher. They're gonna put the Roaring Night, oh my god, on my tombstone. My lack of a better word, brain rot, has only swelled like a parasite eating away at my very psyche from the inside. There's been days where I've watched multiple Deltarune-related Fury videos back to back, with a varying amount of attention given, not even delving into the piles of other Deltarune fan media that's entered my skull the past couple months. And likewise, the game's gotten significantly more eyes on it, with new waves of fans eager to create said media, and others hating it for being so saturated, as per fandom tradition. Not sure how relevant this will be down the line, but the stuff on wplace.live feels like the first real significant backlash Deltarune and its community has received. It's almost kind of thrilling to think about how massive this game has become. I think this is what Flowey was getting at. Well, all that energy needs to go somewhere, and I figured it'd be fun to analyze some stuff in the new chapters post-release, in a similar manner to what I did at the tail end of the Chapter 2 era. If Toby's releasing the game in chunks, it feels appropriate to give my thoughts as they come. So, for the time being, let me indulge myself for a second time, and maybe I can make an interesting point somewhere, though I can hardly say that's what I'm aiming for. Because I'm aiming for the TV guy. Which is one of many Mr. Antenna's extravagant minigames you take part in throughout Deltarune's third chapter. Playing in a rock concert, cooking food, but mostly serving it to customers, tearing down tiny houses as Kaiju Suzy, and, of course, getting to play video games with your pals. It's honestly pretty wholesome. But past the silly exterior, there's a strange melancholic feeling that starts to seep in over the course of the chapter's runtime. It was already fairly clear that denizens of the Dark World are mainly inanimate objects given life by their respective fountain, but seeing it spelt out by Ralsei, coinciding with Darkners as a whole acknowledging their place in the real world, feels like a distinct shift in tone. That leaves Tenna himself as one of the last bastions of the previous chapter's pure escapist fantasy. He's the family man, he's the family pet, he's the family child, but most of all, he's the family TV. More than anyone else, he wants to keep up the facade of play to validate his own existence, even if that entails self-destructive behavior to cling on to what little relevance he has in the present day. This might seem vaguely antagonistic, and he does try to stop the heroes after the second board, but he's ultimately too weak-willed to go much beyond the theatrics of villainy. Above all else, Tenna doesn't want to be at the center of conflict, he just wants to be loved again. This, I think, gives us the clearest view into Chris's personal life yet. They may not seem all that fazed, but Tenna is an uncomfortable reflection of their own familial troubles, nagging away at Chris in particular in an ill attempt to bond over their shared history, no matter what taboo subjects come up in the process. It permeates every inch of the TV world, from Lanino and Elnina's shaky relationship, to Ram's compassion stripped by his inevitable petrification, and even more minor environmental details, like the green room's right-side couch being dull and unkempt, a la Chris's real bedroom, on top of the continued cryptic egg trauma room shenanigans. There's no escape from their real world. Delving into the deepest recesses of the game backstage only reveals an even more personal look into Chris's mind, the secret hiding place which they try to pull us away from, taunted by the foe within for their one chance at what freedom might entail. Whether they like it or not, Chris's will bleeds into their dark fountain like a stake in the heart. And I mean, you can't exactly patch something like that up. Both them and Tenna seem to hold some allegiance to the Knight, taking time off from their assigned roles to set the stage for the Knight's next course of action. But the latter is no hero, so he must eventually be taken care of and discarded, as yet another tool to an unknown end. They're like actors in a theater, a notion which is substantiated by the chapter taking place in a literal theater. It can't get more on the nose than that. Okay, let me pull it back a little. I personally don't see my prior observations about the game's narrative as anything that deep, nor with what will come up later in this video. You can save that for someone more qualified. But I doubt that's how people were engaging with this chapter. Which is to say, you can't ignore the rules card-shaped diversions in the path. Chapter 3 is a very silly part of the game overall. It has its deeper moments, but they remain underlying for the most part. Even the man himself, Toby Fox, has admitted that he felt embarrassed by just how much meandering there is. Of course, most of the diversions are contextualized, as Tenna keeping the heroes busy until the night makes its way in, but how that underlying internal conflict with Chris is explored is what warrants the tomfoolery. It's what makes me look back upon Chapter 3 so fondly, even after the scriptedness of the boards and the tedium of the rules card fight become apparent. And it feels especially fitting that this chapter ends with a major threat, shrouded in darkness, seeping into the light world, taking Undyne away into the shelter, setting off the currently ongoing story arc of obtaining the passcodes needed to enter. Is this fun for Chris? Do they take part in these fantastical adventures out of obligation? When first meeting Ram in the green room, he reminisces on the times Chris used to play pretend with objects, which would later be given life by the dark world. He certainly comes off more sincere compared to Tenna's innately performative hospitality, though it's hard to say there aren't any harmful caveats to Ram's demeanor either. During a conversation with him, he makes mention of a particular girl that Chris used to play with, someone presumably with a very close connection to them at the time. Who's that girl, anyway? But if I were to place my bet, and I'm not exactly a gambling guy, I'd wager a good $25 that that girl is Noelle Holiday. That's at least enough money for another copy of Deltarune. Given her complete absence from Chapter 3, she hasn't changed much since we last saw her. Her return as a full-blown Dark World party member has still yet to come, but we finally get to hang out at her house to work on the school project. Yeah, you know both of these lesbians have ulterior motives, perhaps some more ulterior than others. Who's to say Noelle doesn't have her own reasons for bringing Susie and Chris over? Susie coming over to Chris's place at the end of Chapter 2 was always a major highlight of the story for me, so it's really great to get to do something like that again, even if the overarching plot has become uncomfortably intertwined with the cute stuff to fully ignore. But Noelle's weird. Toy Santas, a fridge for bottled water, bronze ninja weapons, unbronzed ninja weapons, ominous black doors, as well as the piano on the other side of the wall. Motherfucker, the other side of the wall thing was like literally just some shit I made up. Yes, this is where we finally get to see things teased in the Spampton sweepstakes come to fruition. Oh, most of what I mentioned previously isn't Noelle's fault, to be fair, but she might be a little complicit. She's an internet weirdo, too, just as the scriptures foretold. Even her room oozes 2 decades worth of culture without skipping a beat. G stands for her friend's gothic mixtape, F stands for the flat screen TV, C stands for her retro gaming consoles, and S stands for Chris is an asshole. That may be more evergreen compared to everything else, though. But they got chill non-binary swag, so I forgive them. I'm trying my best here not to do a literal play-by-play of the Holiday House sequence, but it's so damn tightly packed from end to end. It's kinda hard not to. So let me do something a little more elaborate. At the heart of this section of the game, and a few other segments, are the 2 girls. The centerpiece to an unfolding romance nearing a point of no return. And those nerdy things are something they find a shared bond over, like most gay teens out there. AVGN is brought up as the conversational appetizer to the main course of board James. That's how deep we're cutting here. Noelle wields the blade of Saint Nick, and Susie tactfully parries it with her axe of dentist, chaining it into her shared fascination with dragon blazers, showing more of her dorky side in the process. But they remain in neutral throughout, despite both characters' barrages. Over the course of this not-so-subtle house tour, the veil over these characters' strange lives reads more like a spotlight than a shadow. The comedy in everyone having been to the Dark World already is apparent, but having to carry the weight of being the supposed heroes is another. Supposedly. Whether or not Noelle is one of the main heroes has been up in the air since the beginning given her subdued role. But likewise, Susie barging in to be Chris's class partner over Noelle in Chapter 1 feels especially abrupt for a prophesized hero. She might be the girl, but she's an outside factor. Neither of them quite fit into place, and that struggle feels reflected in their real lives. The girl grew up in a wealthy family in the heart of her town. The girl in poverty routinely moved away, leaving destruction in her wake. Despite their polar opposite upbringings, both of them equally lack the sufficient care and support they need from the adults in their lives, parents or otherwise. One by one, the blanks regarding Susie's home life get filled as these chapters go on, implicitly or not. Her continued aversion to the rightmost apartment complex speaks volumes. Everything presented about her speaks volumes, really. But Susie isn't one to talk. It almost makes the nauseous full-blast AC feng shui of Noelle's house seem ordinary, ideal if you want to stretch definitions beyond recognition. The spitting image of Carol Holiday hangs over the house about as much as Noelle's absentee older sister. She's like a homestuck guardian, but maybe worse. It's hard to gauge how Carol might act under more normal circumstances, given her limited screen time currently, but what we hear about her from Noelle is nothing short of deeply concerning, especially for someone who seems so hell-bent on preserving her children's belongings and other trinkets. And on the weird route, okay, let everything that transpired beforehand sink in for a bit. Jesus Christ. Anyways, at the end of the weird route, Carol seems a little too nonchalant about Noelle's sudden urge to go to the festival with Chris. Any ulterior motives aside, I feel like it says a lot that she didn't seem to notice anything off about her own daughter, though maybe that's more so supplementary than anything. It's really no wonder why people think she's the villain. The story becomes a whole lot simpler if it revolves around one cruel grown-up in power. And I want to say I'm looking forward to Susie and Noelle's inevitable date during the festival, but with all that's going on in the light and dark, I find it hard not to feel a little trepidatious as the story approaches that point. Even if the Yuri isn't outright doomed, love can come with baggage. Within every shadow lies an even darker side, something more devastating than a betrayal of trust from a loved one, or the parasitical grasp of an unknown higher force masquerading as a childhood friend. This is Deltarune's mimetic side, and my god, is it potent. Specifically, when it comes to our hulking friend and YouTube poop machine, Jackenstein. His battle features one of the game's most elaborate gimmicks seen up to this point, the house. What can the Undertale bullet hell action offer that a traditional turn-based system couldn't? Put simply, in Adobe Flash Classic, you navigate several unique maze layouts while in the dark, another new gimmick introduced here that dramatically reduces your TP gain. Nabbing the exit key doesn't net a reward, but on your way out, which chases you until you get to the exit, Wario Land 4 style. Though apparently it can appear in some circumstances if you actually take too long. Not that I would know, since I spend my time careening into every hazard conceivable. With each passing round, the chase sequences escalate in increasingly ridiculous ways, and the sentence mixing with it. This is some shit that could have only been concocted by the mind of a man going on years of restless nights, which checks out. I kinda took it for granted in the moment, but looking back, genuinely, this is one of my favorite fights in the whole game. Undertale has never felt more humble, and I couldn't be more delighted to see the systems it established be taken this far. And it's really amusing, too. That said though, I think what makes Jackenstein particularly memorable to me isn't the mildly esoteric battle, or even the himbo design sensibilities, but something that goes down well after his initial encounter. After the strange rhythm of the Third Sanctuary's music fades out, A large glass tower looms over as the one thing standing between our heroes and the fountain. But with Jackenstein's help, they're able to get at least some of the way up. But if you lose any recruits, instead of being hoisted up by the other Darkners, Jack is caught mid-climb and dies. What makes this especially strange is that he isn't a main character like Tenna, nor is his fate seemingly prophesized in any regard. If you're too careless, Jackenstein will fall into the abyss and subsequently be ejected from the story, presumably. Determinism has always been a big part of this game from the very start, and Chapter 4 in particular really leans into the idea that Deltarune is immutable, as is the legend of Deltarune on that meta-narrative shit, which leaves us with only microcosms of narrative influence at a small scale, possibly barring the weird route. But Jack isn't just another recruit for Castletown, he's someone to be brought out on Festival Night, by his own words. In the light world, he takes the form of a Halloween decoration in a storage closet, one so large that Susie thinks we'll have to come back tomorrow to get him, and I can't help but wonder what happens in the scenario of his death? Emphasis on the question mark. What does it actually mean for a Darkener to die? What will the person setting up the decoration see when they look inside this closet? The fantasy of the Dark World is one of perpetuity. Even in the wake of Calamity, the Darkners merely petrify into stone, instead of being annihilated outright. It should be antithetical to their very being. It probably is for all we know. But chapter by chapter, we inch a little closer to what that may entail, through the vehicle of the player's agency. No matter how railroaded this narrative is, you're still gonna need some willpower to make the journey along the way the best it can be. But even if you break your bond with Jack, his essence still persists through the mechanics his battle tutorialized. Even if the stakes eclipse his entire character by comical orders of magnitude, your choices might not matter in the end, but whatever memories you make will. Or something like that. I just like how this ostensive joke character gets to embody the game's more serious thematic elements to an extent, taking him just that bit further with the divergent scene towards the chapter's end. Terminal ambivalence leads to pumpkin murder, etc., etc. On that note, I have something of a confession to make. I didn't end up encountering Chapter 4's secret boss on my first playthrough. Hell, I got partway through Chapter 3's side quest with my gamer skills, but I barely scratched the surface of the 4th. Despite the game's constant hints towards there being more you can do with Jack's climb claws beyond mandatory progression points, and even stumbling into one of the secret areas before obtaining them, I never thought to look around much deeper. Why? Well, I don't, like, I'm not even worried about the fucking secret boss, the Scrimblow Bimblow, if he exists. I want to see where this goes. Okay, we're not talking about him. Well, you could say he's related, in a sense. Actually, hold on, who the hell is this? Stories are kind of a troubling matter for the audience. They make you yearn, they make you think, they make you smile, they make you terrified, they make you feel things. It's sickening. What's more troubling is that, apparently, some of them are serialized. You might not know where plot threads may go, or what characters take on what roles if you happen to consume it before its completion. Assuming if it's ever completed. Which for fans of said work, will no doubt lead to rampant speculation of how it could continue. This has been the reality of all Deltarune analysis and discourse for the past 7 or so years. What makes this game unique is that its predecessor was a one-and-done experience, but now the audience has expectations of where this game will go, on top of being the successor to Undertale, you know. Which brings us to the church pastor guy. Alvin wasn't all too noteworthy until the second chapter came around, where a particular scene with him plays out if you visit the graveyard. Right as you're about to leave, he makes a very strange comment about the object that Gerson was ostensibly buried with. And is it right for this hammer to... Oh my god, is he going to grave rob his father? What's he gonna do with the hammer? Couple that with his appraisal on how his father's work inspired others around the world, I think we might just have a twist villain on our hands. Dare I say, the Roaring Knight himself? You know, 'cause dark fountains are kinda like fiction in a way, that whole sector of analysis. So that take some people had on Alvin was completely off the mark. He's not the knight, he's not even anywhere to be found inside the church's dark fountains. He's just another background character among a sea of NPCs dotting hometown. But what if? What if Alvin was relevant? Right inside a drawer in his office lies the hammer he spoke of the day before, still coated in Gerson's dust. By this point in the game, there's seemingly a whole conspiracy revolving around the knight, with the mayor at the forefront. So it's not impossible that Alvin might have preemptively dug up his father's grave, so he could see Gerson in the flesh one last time. It's just an incredibly unlikely scenario, and one that I feel does a massive disservice to his character. Sin may not exist in this religion, but you'd have to be especially unhinged to go digging up coffins of your relatives on a random day, let alone as a pastor. Not to mention the lack of visible desecration in the graveyard before or after the Dark World, which more or less debunks that notion to begin with. Despite the stoicism he tries to put on, Alvin is still evidently burdened by the expectations placed on him from his father's legacy. Gerson's hugely successful book series left unfinished after his passing, and without anyone to pick up the mantle, he feels as if he's failed him. It's hard not to see how that might affect his grieving process. If you can't follow in your father's creative footsteps, how can you ever truly let go? And if you can't let go, why part ways with the last of his tangible remains? In all likelihood, Gerson might have never been buried in the first place, leaving his coffin untouched in hometown's church for years and years. It comes off like a negative feedback loop of guilt over not letting his father rest in peace, and a lack of willpower to go beyond his ostensive role as just the town's pastor. But through the power of the Dark World, Susie manages to relay the message Gerson never got to tell Alvin, to give him the hope he needs to follow through with his own creative aspirations, and by extension, hopefully the rest his father graciously deserves. While the focus is obviously placed on Susie and the old man's bond, that old guy is still the visage of Gerson Boom. He's still a world-famous novelist, and, in a way, still Alvin's dad. Minor character or not, actual presence in the Dark World or not, Alvin is still innately involved in the equation, and that's genuinely really cool. Deltarune is a very emotionally driven game, and the characters are more powerful when their emotions are the main driving factor, over any impersonal, conniving motivations. Logistics are certainly involved, but they aren't the most important part. This image sort of sums it up. And that goes for everyone, from Chris, to Susie, to Birdly, to Pizza Pants, and yes, even the pastor guy. Somehow that's weirder than the fourth guy, don't ask. I love how this game can convey so much about its characters without even necessitating an on-screen appearance, through environmental storytelling and other small details. It's not that Alvin couldn't have involvement with the conspiracy surrounding the knight and the shelter codes. It's certainly possible. I just don't think that should supersede all other lenses of analysis to view his character through, especially given the aspect of familial grief. That cycle of guilt and dejection burning him up on the inside is merely implicit, waiting for those willing to look a little closer and peer around the corner, through the shadow in which it retreats to, not just unknown, but perhaps something forbidden from acknowledgement. Or maybe it doesn't exist in the first place. Who was standing behind the closet door again? After first defeating Queen and saving Birdly, we come across her again right down the gangway, monologuing about the nature of the Dark World, like King before her. We've heard its name uttered before, we had a vague idea of the devastation they would no doubt bring, but never has the full title been outright stated. This world, the one in the unused classroom, and the ones to be created in the church were made by the Roaring Knight. A figure so powerful and elusive, you only ever hear gossip from those who themselves overheard word of the knight's actions. Everything else is left up to imagination. Even after encountering them firsthand multiple times throughout the new chapters, it's still incredibly difficult to pin down what its plan is, beyond bringing about the roaring, let alone what it physically is to begin with. Mulling over the innate wordplay of the night and its attack iconography can only get you so far. But there is one thing that gives clarity to the Roaring Knight's being, one person in particular who has the answers we need. But that's the thing. They're nowhere to be found. Des has continued to skirt around the game's story, despite getting to grow more with the people closest to her. With Asriel, it's made explicitly clear at multiple points that he's gone off to college. Chris is certainly burdened by his absence, but he's gonna be back next week. It's a completely different energy compared to when you first enter Des's bedroom. The lid has still yet to be completely blown on the Des plotline, but you don't play a track titled The Distance Between Two in an empty bedroom for nothing. You don't remember December if she's still around in the present day. Guests don't get barred from so much as stepping foot in her room if there's nothing needing to be preserved. Which is sort of ironic given the thrashed musical instruments on the ground. The floors and walls themselves are clean, but the bed remains unmade, the instruments still tattered, and the wiffle bat misshapen jaggedly by the contour of Chris's head, and other weapons of mass destruction. A picture starts to form of the kind of person December was. A rambunctious, sporty, punk, flannel-wearing, young teenage, aspiring rock star, possibly younger than present-day Noelle. But above all else, she's a caring girl who will stop at nothing to protect her younger sister from harm, even if the primary striped shirt adorning perpetrator of antics starts seeing stars. Though the altercations are never that serious, I would hope. Despite the bombshell of new info localized within the Aurora Borealis themed walls of this room, a lot of details regarding Des still feel fuzzy, the most important of which I feel being her relationship to Chris. To bring it back to a certain line from Chapter 3, the way Ram describes the person Chris played make-believe with as just that girl feels weirdly foreboding. All the details line up with what we know about Chris and Noelle's dynamic as kids, including the eventual estrangement that came about at some point, so logistically, that girl should be Noelle, but I haven't been able to stop ruminating about Des as another possibility. There's a strange amount of allusions to her throughout Chapter 3, particularly towards its conclusion. Right after Tenna's spiel about Des putting on a risque music channel against Toriel's wishes, a door locked with the parental code 1225 stands before the heroes, leading to the snow zone. An eerie snowy set with stars dotting the pitch-black sky, with a photorealistic Christmas tree sitting at the very edge, where Toriel is captured. It's a complete non sequitur compared to the rest of the TV world's aesthetic. And past that Christmas tree is where we first encounter the Knight. Des was the first to leave the Dreamer residence, and the Knight was the last to come back, to destroy the very thing that brought their families together. December is the Roaring Knight, to the extent that the Roaring Knight is December herself. And this is just a fraction of the many ways Deltarune alludes to the identity of its main antagonists. And let me tell you, it's a lot. But what does it actually mean for her to be the Roaring Knight, in whatever way she manifests as that role? The who is fairly straightforward, but everything else is significantly more ambiguous. So here's my read on that. A piece of imagery in this game that's come up time and time again are closets. The most obvious instance being the school supply closet, home to Castletown and its denizens. It's our first dark fountain, and appropriately one with extensive build-up, before so much as treading its starting area. But that in-between period is kind of strange, isn't it? We aren't exactly in the light, but neither totally in the dark. The room's reality has been twisted into something lacking distinct boundaries, or as Susie succinctly puts it, broken. It's incredibly unusual for the game to linger on the space between the light and dark world like this, beyond the brief transition animation appearing in Chapter 2 onwards. It calls to mind the self-ascribed unused dialogue hidden in each chapter, mainly a snippet from Threes, which reflects on a scenario eerily close to what Chris and Susie underwent, down to the door getting slammed from behind. The anonymous speaker describes it as a recurring nightmare, however. They're not even sure themselves how they ended up in their abyssal predicament, deprived of most senses other than their own consciousness. The first 2 chapters' respective messages depict someone begging for help, but the latter 2 start to settle in on this idea of uncomfortable liminality. It's been somewhere between hours and years, it's somewhere between waking and dreaming, somewhere between the dead and the living. Without a tangible grip on reality, things must be assumed to exist, real or not. This is the phenomenon Rousey speaks of in his Chapter 3 monologue, the total darkness where nothing can be perceived. But it's not to be mistaken with the dark world itself. Rather, it's a concept much more grounded in our reality, the night. And this is what the roaring night embodies. An unsettling truth wrapped in darkness, twisting and morphing as our eyes try to make sense of the inscrutable, in part perpetuated by this town's collective discomfort surrounding deaths. Everyone but the holidays themselves avoiding the subject matter entirely. The closets that mustn't be peered into, the shelter that shouldn't be opened, the dark places it retreats to because it knows no one will look and no one will see. Even the little things, like the black shard attained from overcoming the night, displays its property of perpetual liminality, seemingly the only weapon to not change form between the light and dark world, or its stats for that matter. But after so many years, the night has started to breach its containment, evidently, flooding the light world with dark fountains one by one, perhaps as a means of self-preservation, and in turn, setting the stage for 3 heroes to embark on an outwardly lighthearted adventure, derived partially from imagined games Chris played when they were younger. Maybe that's why they're the party leader. Even if the at-present adversary wasn't ever directly involved with their games of make-believe, Chris and that girl's influence can still be felt throughout the first 3 chapters. And speaking of, a big part of Chapter 3 and 4's narrative explores what it means for someone to create a dark fountain, and the way their will spills into the dark world. For the first time, we see a dark fountain get remade, Susie twisting its being into a more disjointed, parallel side. She's not some maniac hellbent on world destruction. She creates it to learn the passcode to the door locked by the night, in order to thwart its plan. But even still, Susie has repeatedly stated her desire to keep going on Dark World adventures indefinitely, unknowingly putting her in a similar headspace to a harbinger of the Roaring, all in the name of continuing to be friends with everyone she's met across both worlds. Susie is the Knight's foil as much as she's their counterpart. And the connections don't stop there. They're both rule breakers, cocky as all hell, and have a knack for carnage. The difference ultimately lies in their will. Susie fights for the balance of worlds, while the Knight fights for a never-ending night. Both involve treading the dark world by necessity. Also, Susie plays Dessa's guitar for Noelle. She doesn't exactly come off like a musical type, but Chapter 4 is where that really starts to come to light. As is many things for her, it's a troubled relationship, but through Chris's piano playing, she becomes more open to it. Even in the face of a seemingly inevitable tragedy, a looming sacrifice that threatens her loved ones, she still believes in a better outcome, one where those memories won't need to be forgotten, a future where she still gets to hang out with Lancer, to get flustered around Noelle, to eat Rousey's cakes, and maybe play piano with Chris. This, to me, feels like a core part of what Deltarune is ultimately getting at. The balance between holding on to the memories of the past and not letting what you cherished consume you, especially as that relates to grief. And that's something these new chapters have excelled at tackling, even if we may not have all the answers or context yet, if ever. And even if my analysis of the night is completely fucking wrong. Because above all else, I really love this game a lot. And you do too, I imagine. And despite all the trials and tribulations that come with Deltarune's scattered release schedule, it's truly wonderful to see this game come into its own in real time. And it's even cooler to get to personally cover its continued evolution in an analytical format. It's a bit unsettling to think where fate might drive these characters and their world, but at the same time, the prospect of that next chapter, that next step, is nothing short of exhilarating. One final anecdote. Here's a frivolous thought I had. Repeatedly throughout Deltarune, it's stated and shown to us that Chris plays the piano. Hell, it's a pretty major part of their character. Just that, for whatever reason, they can't or are unwilling to play when others are around, slamming the keys cacophonously and calling it a day. There's a lot of different angles you could examine that behavior through, but what I almost find stranger is simply how they became known for their playing in the first place. Notably, it's never implied the Dreamer family ever owned one, so they likely weren't mentored by their parents. And while they have played before in public, those spaces don't particularly come off as avenues for getting to grips with playing, to me anyways. Which makes the piano in Noelle's house a bit curious. This huge, super expensive instrument squeezed between the permanent Christmas tree fixture in the far corner of the kitchen isn't played by anyone other than Chris. The holidays are loaded, sure, but all this for a family friend? And that's when it hit me. The only holiday family member known to have played music instruments, various music instruments, mind you, is December Holiday. That piano was for her, wasn't it? And with few other people in town with a musical inclination like Des, a bit more about Chris's relationship to her comes into focus. Don't forget,